My gold digger mom found out that my boyfriend was a secret millionaire and started doing everything she could to steal his money. When begging and threats didn't work, she resorted to faking family emergencies and crisis to get her way. Ever since I was young, my mother has demanded I marry a rich man who's able to retire not only me, but her as well. Well, last year I met my boyfriend Tom, and he comes from a very wealthy family. You'd assume my mother loved him, but you'd be wrong, because she has no idea that he's rich. You see, despite being a millionaire, my boyfriend works a 9-to-5 because he hates having money at his fingertips, and only accesses his wealth for big-time emergencies. He wears thrift store clothes, doesn't bother with grooming himself, and honestly looks closer to a homeless guy than a millionaire. Funnily enough, this is exactly why I love him. My mother, on the other hand, hates him. The first time she ever saw him, she pulled me aside to ask me why I was with this junkie. I told her it's because I loved him, but she scoffed, saying that our family can't have someone so low-class ruining our image. She pestered me to break up with him at first, but when she saw this didn't deter me, she changed tactics, thinking that if she just insulted him enough, he'd no longer find dating me worth it. She tried everything she could. She called him homeless in front of my whole family. She edited him out of every picture she took, and to this day she refuses to invite him for dinner because she won't cook for people like him. The entire time I kept asking him why he wasn't telling her who he really was, and he said it's because my mother has an ugly, black and rotten heart. He said that if he told her the truth, she'd do nothing but demand for his money, and that would be worse than what he endures now. Fast forward to last weekend. My mother helps run a small charity that raises money for stray dogs, which sounds great, except she only does it for attention, and hasn't donated a dime in the last year. I know so because she's told me herself. The only thing she does is organize the events. Anyway, the event was at this extremely fancy hotel, and when Tom and I showed up, I could see my mom get visibly frustrated. She walked over to him and started demanding he leaves. She started whisper yelling at us both, calling him a beggar and telling me I've disgraced our family by bringing human waste to her event. She proceeded to call over the security guard, and he started leading us both out. I tried protesting, but my mom wouldn't listen, and told me that if I ever brought my hobo boyfriend to something like this ever again, she wouldn't hesitate to cut me off. Many heads turned towards us at that moment, and literally every single person told us to just go in peace and stop causing a scene. I was embarrassed as we were escorted out, and this was the first time in my relationship I saw my boyfriend get genuinely angry. I began apologizing to him, but he reassured me that none of this was my fault, before taking out his phone and making a call. A few minutes later, the same security guard came back out, and looking quite embarrassed asked us to come back in. When we did, the entire room was quiet and looking at my boyfriend, and my mom was beet red. Next thing I knew, my boyfriend was being called up to center stage to give a speech as the year's top donor. I had no idea what was happening until Tom started speaking. As it turns out, he had enough of my mom. So much so, in fact, that when we were escorted out, he called his accountant and told him to donate $10,000 right away. He knew this charity was small, so a donation this big would make waves instantly, and because his name was on the official list, he knew he would end up on stage for a speech. After explaining all of that, he went on to say that the reason he wanted to get up and talk to everyone was so he could talk a little about my mom. Everyone turned to look at her, and her legs started to shake and she began nearly doubling over. All she could do was muster up the fakest smile, and as soon my boyfriend started speaking, she froze in place. Because instead of ruining her entire life like he could have, my boyfriend started singing her praises. He lied and talked about how great of a person she was, and how kind of a soul she was for accepting him into their family. By the end, everyone was applauding my mom, and he invited her up on stage to talk about this charity and get a picture with him, a picture he'd be proud to post online. Watching my mother die inside, realizing what she had done and who my boyfriend was priceless. My boyfriend and I could see just how uncomfortable she was the entire time and kept laughing about it, but then the night ended, and it turned out my mom hadn't learned anything. She came up to us, acting lovey-dovey. No apology, no heart-to-heart, just a simple question about how much money my boyfriend actually had in his bank account. I expected him to have some sort of look when she asked this, but instead he just stood there smiling. All he told her was, "Enough for you to start acting like you're my best friend." That's all it took. I don't even think she registered that he was borderline making fun of her, because she immediately switched to this super fake friendly voice and started introducing Tom to all her friends as my daughter's boyfriend from the distinguished family, as if she hadn't just tried to have him thrown out. She was practically hanging off his arm by the end of the night, taking selfies with him to post on her social media, and telling everyone how she always saw something special in him. It was Oscar-worthy levels of fakeness. Tom was polite, but I could tell he was seething. He has this vein in his forehead that pulses when he's really mad but trying to stay composed, and it was throbbing all night. Later that night, after we'd suffered through about 3 hours of my mom suddenly treating Tom like royalty, we were driving home and Tom was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. I could tell the whole thing had gotten to him way more than he was letting on. He's usually so laid back that seeing him this upset was actually alarming. I asked if he wanted to come up to my apartment for coffee so we could talk about what happened, but he said he needed some space to process the evening. That left me alone all night replaying the charity disaster in my mind and wondering what would happen next. I barely slept, actually. I kept having these anxiety dreams where my mom was trying to marry Tom herself, which is disturbing on so many levels. Early the next morning, like 7 a.m. early, my mom called me asking if she could have brunch with my successful boyfriend. Her voice was dripping with this fake enthusiasm that made me want to throw my phone out the window. I had literally never heard her use that tone before. It was like listening to a completely different person. I knew exactly what she was after, but I reluctantly agreed to set up a meeting, then immediately called Tom to warn him about her obvious intentions. He sounded tired on the phone, but not surprised at all. We quickly came up with a strategy to handle her inevitable money questions without revealing too much. I suggested we make a drinking game out of it, taking mental shots every time she mentioned investments or real estate, but Tom pointed out we'd be drunk within 15 minutes. When Tom showed up at my my apartment to pick me up for brunch, I was surprised to see him wearing what looked like designer jeans and a nice button-up shirt, definitely more polished than his usual look. When I commented on it, he winked and said sometimes you had to dress for the role you're playing, but he still had that casual vibe about him, and I realized he was playing a careful balancing act between looking presentable but not flashy. He'd even deliberately left a small coffee stain on his cuff, which I'm pretty sure was intentional camouflage. We drove to this upscale restaurant my mom had chosen, and when we arrived, I saw she had brought my Aunt Madison with her. Great, back up. This already felt like an ambush. Aunt Madison is basically my mom's clone, but with harsher highlights and an even more judgmental personality. She once told my 14-year-old cousin her thighs were problematic. Yeah, she's that kind of person. My mom greeted Tom with this huge fake hug, calling him my future son-in-law, which was ridiculous since we'd only been dating for a few months at that point. The whole time she was hugging him, her eyes kept darting to his wrist, clearly trying to figure out if his watch was expensive. Tom noticed and kept fidgeting with his sleeve to hide it. I later found out it was a Patek Philippe worth more than my car that he'd absent-mindedly put on that morning. When the waiter came to take our orders, my mom insisted that Tom choose the wine for the table, which I immediately recognized as a trap to see if he knew anything about expensive wines. Tom smoothly ordered a mid-priced bottle and explained he preferred it for the taste rather than the prestige, completely frustrating my mom's attempt to assess his spending habits. Her smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. Throughout the meal, Mom kept asking these probing questions about Tom's family business, trying to make it sound like casual conversation when it was obviously an interrogation. She'd say things like, "So where did you summer as a child?" and "Which schools did your parents consider for you?" All these weird upper-class dog whistles to try to place his social status. Tom deflected by mentioning his current job at the tech company, but kept the details vague enough that he wasn't technically lying while still maintaining his privacy. He'd say things like, "Oh, I'm just in the IT department," which was technically true since he owned the whole tech division. Then Aunt Madison joined in, directly asking what neighborhood Tom lived in, her tone so judgmental it made me cringe. Tom truthfully mentioned his modest downtown apartment, which was actually just one of several properties he owned, but of course he didn't mention that part. He also accidentally mentioned his noisy neighbors to reinforce the impression it wasn't a luxury building, though in reality he owned the entire floor and there were no neighbors. The most outrageous moment came when my mom accidentally spilled her wine all over Tom's shirt. I say accidentally with massive air quotes because she did this weird telegraphed movement where she looked at me first with this glint in her eye. Instead of getting upset, Tom handled it with total grace, which only seemed to make my mom more frustrated. She was clearly hoping he'd freak out about the cost of the shirt or something. When the check arrived, Mom did this obvious slow reach for her purse, giving Tom plenty of time to grab the bill first, which he did. She immediately commented how surprising it was that he could afford such an expensive meal on his modest salary. Tom just smiled and said something about budgeting for the important things, while signing the receipt. As we were leaving, Mom whispered to me that she'd get to the bottom of his finances, not realizing Tom was right behind her and heard everything. He gave me this knowing look that confirmed all our suspicions about her intentions. I felt so embarrassed I wanted to melt into the floor tiles. The next day, Mom showed up at my apartment completely unannounced, claiming she was just in the neighborhood, which was obviously a lie since I live nowhere near her. She actually lives like 45 minutes away in the suburbs, and has complained multiple times about the drive to my place. I knew she was there to snoop for clues about Tom's wealth. She brought these random cookies as a pretense, but immediately started scanning my apartment, looking in corners and at my shelves like she expected to find bars of gold lying around. Sure enough, she asked to use my bathroom and took forever in there. I got suspicious and went to check on her, only to find her going through the drawer where I keep some of Tom's stuff when he stays over. She was literally examining the tags on his spare socks. I called her out for invading my privacy, but she just said she was looking for aspirin, creating this super awkward standoff in my own home. I don't even keep medicine in that drawer, so her excuse made zero sense. When she came back to the living room, she spotted a business card on my counter from Tom's investment advisor and tried to grab it, but I snatched it away before she could read the details. That seemed to convince her even more that Tom was hiding something. Her eyes got this excited gleam that I recognized from childhood, the same look she'd get when she thought she'd found a wealthy prospect for me to date. She tried a different approach then, asking if Tom might be able to help her with a small financial problem. Apparently, she only needed $5,000, which I knew was a test to see if he'd reveal his resources. She claimed it was for roof repairs, though I'd just been to her house the previous week, and she'd said nothing about roof problems. I told her Tom wasn't her personal ATM, which made her start fake crying about potentially losing her house. I later found out from my cousin that her house was completely paid off years ago. Mom's always been weirdly secretive about her own finances while being obsessed with everyone else's. While she was still there, Tom called my phone, but Mom literally grabbed it out of my hand and answered it herself, creating this super awkward three-way conversation where she invited herself to dinner at his place. Tom tried suggesting a restaurant instead, clearly wanting to protect his privacy, but Mom refused and insisted she wanted a homey experience. Her voice had this sugary quality that made me want to gag. Tom finally gave in, but specified it would be a casual dinner. He emphasized casual in a way that made me suspect he was already planning something. After Mom finally left, I called Tom to warn him about her behavior, but he'd already figured out what she was up to and was preparing his apartment to look modestly furnished. He actually sounded amused, like this was some kind of challenge he was enjoying. He asked me to bring dessert and come early so we could coordinate how to handle the evening. When I got there, I found him putting masking tape over the brand marks on his electronics and hiding his collection of first edition books. When I arrived at Tom's normally luxurious condo, I was shocked to see he'd temporarily redecorated with IKEA furniture and hidden all his expensive art and electronics. He'd even covered his Persian rugs with cheap area rugs from a discount store. There was a stack of pizza boxes in the kitchen, empty ones he'd collected just for show, and he'd replaced his high-end coffee machine with a basic drip model from a drugstore. It looked like a completely different apartment. He'd even put up fake water damage stains in one corner of the ceiling using some kind of theater makeup. Mom arrived carrying an expensive bottle of wine, probably the most expensive thing she'd purchased in years, and immediately began scanning the apartment for signs of wealth. I watched her eyes darting around, clearly disappointed by the IKEA bookshelves and the generic wall art. She kept opening doors by mistake, trying to peek into other rooms. Throughout dinner, she kept making these casual comments designed to extract information about Tom's finances. At one point, she even accidentally spilled wine on his rug, probably expecting him to freak out about the cost. Instead, Tom just grabbed a paper towel and blotted it casually, further convincing Mom he wasn't wealthy. He actually winked at me when she wasn't looking, clearly enjoying the charade. In a particularly bold move, she asked directly about his family's business holdings, claiming she was just curious about his background. Tom vaguely mentioned his dad worked in finance, but changed the subject so quickly she couldn't get details. Her frustration was becoming more obvious by the minute. A week after that dinner, Mom called me crying hysterically about losing her administrative job. The timing seemed suspiciously convenient, especially since she'd recently been bragging about not really needing the job anymore. According to her boss had unfairly fired her for being late too often, which was probably true knowing my mom's habitual tardiness. She'd been fired from 3 similar positions in the past 5 years, always claiming it was never her fault. She asked if she could temporarily stay with me, but my apartment was genuinely too small for 2 people, so I suggested she reach out to Aunt Madison instead. Mom dramatically claimed she might become homeless, grossly exaggerating her financial situation to create urgent sympathy from both Tom and me. She started talking about potentially selling her jewelry, though I've never seen her wear anything that looked particularly valuable. Tom offered to help her update her resume but carefully avoided offering any financial assistance. This was clearly not the response she was hoping for. Her face actually fell when he mentioned job search strategies, instead of writing a check. Mom reluctantly accepted his help, but kept sabotaging the resume session by constantly mentioning her mounting bills and financial struggles. She'd say things like, "Oh, I don't know if I can focus on this resume when my electricity might be shut off tomorrow," while giving Tom these significant looks. I suggested she apply for unemployment benefits, but she complained that the payments would be insulting compared to what she needed, revealing her unrealistic expectations. She actually said the phrase, "barely enough to cover my essential beauty treatments," as if facials were utilities. Tom went above and beyond by connecting Mom with his friend Y, who worked in HR at a good company. I was actually the head of recruiting, but Tom downplayed this connection, just saying his friend might know of an opening. Mom pretended to be interested, but it was clear she was disappointed that Tom had offered a job connection rather than money. She kept making these sighing sounds and checking her watch during their conversation about potential positions. Predictably, Mom skipped the interview Y had arranged, claiming she felt too stressed to go. When I called to check how it went, she gave this elaborate story about having a panic attack in the parking lot. When I confronted her about missing this opportunity, she turned on the waterworks, claiming she was having a breakdown and couldn't handle the pressure right now. She suggested that a vacation might help clear her head, which was an obvious hint for financial support. Tom suggested therapy might help Mom deal with her crisis and offered to research affordable options, still maintaining boundaries while appearing supportive. He actually found a sliding scale clinic with excellent reviews and even offered to drive her to the first appointment. Mom immediately rejected the therapy suggestions and instead asked if Tom could invest some money for her. She claimed she had a small inheritance, news to me, that she wanted to grow aggressively. Tom gently explained that as a regular guy, he couldn't afford to invest money for others, but suggested some practical budgeting strategies. I could tell he was finding it increasingly difficult to maintain his cover story in the face of her direct financial requests. I could see Mom getting increasingly frustrated with our responses, though she tried to hide her disappointment. Her eye was doing that twitchy thing it does when she's really angry but trying to seem pleasant. After a particularly tense dinner where Mom hinted about needing to sell family heirlooms to make ends meet, Tom pulled me aside and expressed concern about her escalating behavior. He actually seemed worried that she might do something extreme, like contact his family directly, or show up at his workplace. We decided we needed a more formal plan to handle her manipulation tactics. Tom suggested we maintain the facade for just a while longer while documenting her behavior in case things got messy. Things got even weirder when Mom created a social media campaign claiming to be down on her luck and tagged Tom in every post, publicly pressuring him to respond with financial help. She posted these sad-looking selfies with captions like, "Sometimes you discover who really cares about you when times get tough," with Tom specifically tagged. This backfired spectacularly when Tom's wealthy college friend Ava commented sympathetically on one of Mom's posts, but innocently mentioned their amazing spring break yacht trip from years ago, unintentionally revealing part of Tom's background. Ava had posted something like, "Hang in there. Tom's one of the most generous people I know. Remember when he paid for everyone's villa after our yacht docked in Santorini?" Mom immediately started investigating Ava's profile, but most of it was private, so she began methodically contacting other friends from Tom's friends list. I discovered Mom's digital detective work when one of Tom's friends messaged me, asking why my mother was asking so many questions about Tom's family. This friend forwarded me messages where Mom had claimed to be planning a surprise party for Tom and needed background information. When I confronted Mom, she claimed she was just trying to know Tom better. She actually tried to make it sound like she was doing this out of maternal concern, checking that he wasn't hiding a criminal background or something. Meanwhile, Tom was receiving confused messages from friends asking about my desperate mother, and these friends inadvertently revealed personal details about Tom's wealth. slowly unraveling his carefully maintained image. One friend mentioned Tom's collection of vintage cars, while another referenced the family's private island, creating a trail of breadcrumbs that Mom eagerly followed. We decided to address the situation directly, but Mom denied any wrongdoing, forcing us to block her from our social media accounts. She acted completely shocked and hurt that we would shut her out when she was just being friendly with Tom's circle. Mom retaliated by posting a lengthy rant about how some people hide their blessings from family, though she didn't specifically name names. The post included vague references to certain young men who pretend to be average while secretly living lives of luxury. It was obviously about Tom, but just indirect enough that she had plausible deniability. The situation escalated when Tom's father called him asking about the strange woman contacting the family business. Unlike us, Tom's dad seemed more amused than concerned by the whole situation. Apparently, Mom had somehow gotten the business number from the company website and had been calling repeatedly asking about investment opportunities for family members. Tom's dad, a shrewd businessman who dealt with his share of opportunists, immediately recognized what was happening. Somehow Mom had obtained Tom's father's phone number and pretended to be from a charity organization to gain information about the family's philanthropic activities. She'd created this whole fictional charity called Hearts and Paws and claimed to be researching potential donors. Tom's father, sensing something was off, mentioned a fictitious family foundation donation event, but gave her a real address, essentially setting a trap to identify who was fishing for information. He later told Tom he'd been dealing with people trying to get close to their money for decades and had developed a sixth sense for detecting gold diggers. Mom excitedly told me about the exclusive event she'd been invited to and insisted I join her, creating an incredibly uncomfortable dilemma for me. She went shopping for a new dress and even got her hair professionally done, investing significant money in preparation for this non-existent event. I warned Tom about his father's trap, and Tom was actually impressed with his dad's intuition. They decided to coordinate a response together, turning this awkward situation into an opportunity for Tom's parents to meet me, though under strange circumstances. Tom's dad suggested hosting a small dinner instead, so that they could assess the situation personally while controlling the environment. The night of the event, Mom dressed in her finest clothes but arrived at what was actually just Tom's parents' regular dinner party. She looked confused when she realized there were only about 10 people there instead of the gala she'd been expecting. Tom's parents warmly welcomed us but intentionally kept conversation focused on non-financial topics, which clearly frustrated Mom's information-gathering mission. Every time she tried to steer conversation toward the family business or their philanthropic foundation, they'd skillfully change the subject to something mundane like gardening or local restaurants. During dinner, Mom directly asked about the family business's annual revenue, but Tom's father smoothly redirected, saying, "Enough to keep Tom in those thrift store clothes he loves," maintaining the charade while subtly acknowledging it. Everyone at the table chuckled while Mom looked confused, clearly not in on the joke but trying to seem like she was. Tom's mother, an elegant woman with a wickedly dry sense of humor, spent the evening asking me genuine questions about my interests and career, while completely ignoring Mom's increasingly desperate attempts to join their conversation. It was like watching a masterclass in polite dismissal. After the dinner disaster, Mom became increasingly desperate. Her subtle approaches weren't working, so she resorted to more dramatic tactics. She somehow, accidentally, encountered Tom's personal banker at a coffee shop and proceeded to introduce herself as practically family, attempting to gain financial information directly. The banker, following proper protocol, refused to discuss Tom's accounts, but mentioned they'd need to reschedule their meeting about his considerable holdings, inadvertently confirming what Mom had suspected all along. Mom called me immediately after this encounter, her voice breathless with excitement about confirming Tom's wealth. She didn't even try to hide her motivations anymore, actually saying, "I knew he was loaded," with this triumphant tone that made my skin crawl. Armed with this partial confirmation, Mom showed up at my workplace crying, claiming she needed emergency dental surgery costing exactly $15,000, creating a medical crisis to extract money. She had her hand dramatically pressed against her jaw and was making these pained expressions that looked rehearsed. My colleague Missy witnessed Mom's performance, but later informed me she'd seen Mom shopping joyfully at the mall just an hour after leaving my office, providing clear evidence of her deception. Missy actually showed me a selfie she'd taken where Mom was clearly visible in the background, carrying shopping bags and laughing with no sign of dental distress. When I confronted Mom with this information, she claimed she was shopping to distract herself from the pain, doubling down on her fabrication. She actually got angry at me for questioning her story, saying I was being unsupportive during her time of need, and suggesting that Tom was turning me against her. Tom offered to connect Mom with his dental insurance representative, but purposely mentioned it was through his exclusive employee benefits package, still maintaining his middle-class facade. Mom declined the dental help, but immediately began researching Tom's company's executive benefits, getting closer to discovering his position as a silent owner. She started dropping specific details about the company in conversation, clearly fishing for confirmation of her suspicions. Through persistent digging online, Mom finally uncovered a business magazine article mentioning Tom's family, though it only referred to him as heir to the fortune, without specific details. It was an old article from about 5 years ago profiling various wealthy families and their next-generation leaders. She triumphantly showed me the article, but her excitement wasn't about connecting with Tom. It was clearly about the money, revealing her unchanged priorities. She kept asking if I knew about this secret side of Tom, suggesting he had been deceiving me too, trying to drive a wedge between us. When I showed Tom the article, instead of being upset, he seemed relieved, suggesting he was ready for the charade to end. He said keeping up the act was becoming exhausting, and maybe it was time to just be honest about everything and see how Mom reacted. He hoped that perhaps once the initial gold-digging excitement wore off, she might learn to appreciate him as a person, rather than a bank account. I was skeptical, but agreed it couldn't be worse than the current situation. Tom decided to address the situation directly, but wanted to do it on his terms, so we planned a dinner at his actual luxury penthouse. He spent a day returning his apartment to its normal state, removing the IKEA furniture and revealing his true living situation. He said it felt good to stop living a lie, though he was understandably apprehensive about my mom's reaction. When we invited mom to dinner, she immediately accepted but asked if she could bring her friend who works in wealth management, showing she was still scheming. This friend was someone I'd never heard of before, obviously just an excuse to bring someone who could assess Tom's assets. Tom agreed to the additional guest, but specified it would be a family dinner only, setting boundaries even as he prepared to reveal the truth. Mom sounded disappointed, but agreed to come alone. The night before the dinner, Mom texted asking if Tom could loan her $2,000 for a new outfit for the dinner. This transparent attempt was the final straw, and Tom decided to completely change his approach for the revelation dinner. Instead of the gentle explanation he'd planned, he decided to make the evening a more direct confrontation about her behavior. He arranged for his chef to prepare an elaborate meal, and decided not to hold anything back about his lifestyle. On the night of the dinner, Tom arranged for his driver to pick Mom up in a luxury car. She immediately began questioning the driver about his employer, confirming her priorities hadn't changed at all. The driver later told Tom that she'd spent the entire ride asking about how much the car cost, and whether Tom owned other vehicles. When Mom arrived at Tom's real penthouse, she looked stunned at the obvious wealth on display, but quickly recovered and commented on how he must have recently come into money, trying to explain away her previous treatment of him. She actually said something like, "Oh, you must have just received your inheritance," while eyeing the clearly expensive artwork on his walls. Tom calmly explained that he'd always had wealth, but chose to live simply because he valued authenticity, highlighting the contrast with her materialistic values. He mentioned specifics about his family's holdings and his own portfolio, finally laying all cards on the table about his financial situation. Mom immediately apologized for any misunderstandings, but focused on complimenting his possessions rather than acknowledging her behavior, revealing her unchanged character. She literally ignored his explanation to ask how much the marble countertops had cost, missing the entire point of the conversation. During dinner, Tom discussed his family's actual business empire, but emphasized their commitment to ethical investments and philanthropy, subtly critiquing Mom's approach to money. He talked about the charitable foundation his parents had established, and his own plans to give away a significant portion of his wealth during his lifetime. Mom barely listened to the ethical components and kept interrupting to ask about specific figures and assets, making her priorities embarrassingly clear. She asked if he owned any brands she would know, and whether his family had connections to celebrities, completely missing the substance of the conversation. I tried redirecting the conversation to lighter topics, but Mom persistently returned to questions about Tom's net worth, creating an increasingly uncomfortable atmosphere. At one point, she actually asked if his watch was a real Rolex, and tried to examine it across the table, causing Tom to noticeably pull back his arm. Tom's personal chef served an exquisite meal, which prompted Mom to comment that it must cost a fortune to employ household staff. She asked if the chef was available for private parties, and whether Tom could lend him to her for her next social gathering, treating people like possessions. Tom explained how his wealth was primarily in charitable trusts, which meant strict limitations on personal spending, preemptively addressing her likely future requests. He emphasized that while he lived comfortably, most of his assets were earmarked for specific causes and couldn't be accessed for personal use. Mom's expression fell at the mention of charitable trusts, but she quickly suggested she could help manage his charitable giving, attempting to insert herself into his finances. She mentioned her experience with the dog charity, glossing over the fact that its actual impact had been minimal compared to the social events surrounding it. Tom politely explained that professional trustees handled all distributions, but mentioned that approved charities could apply for grants, giving her a procedural rather than personal avenue. He suggested that if her dog charity had legitimate operations and proper documentation, she could submit a formal application just like any other organization. Mom immediately declared she would restart her dog charity work, though her enthusiasm seemed clearly connected to potential funding, rather than actual concern for animals. She started talking about hosting a major fundraising gala, before even mentioning any actual work with dogs, revealing her continued focus on social events rather than charitable impact. I expressed surprise at her renewed interest in charity work, but Mom claimed she'd always been passionate about giving back, completely rewriting her own history. She conveniently forgot all the times she'd complained about the dog charity being too much work for too little recognition. Tom proposed a toast to authentic relationships, and his pointed choice of words made Mom visibly uncomfortable, creating a moment of clear accountability. She raised her glass but couldn't quite meet his eyes, showing at least some awareness of how her behavior appeared to others. As dinner concluded, Mom asked when Tom might officially join the family, her transparent focus on his wealth rather than our relationship prompting Tom to make a surprising announcement about our future. She actually started discussing potential wedding venues before Tom and I had even talked about marriage ourselves, getting way ahead of reality in her eagerness to secure the connection. Tom revealed he'd been planning to propose to me but stated he had concerns about certain family dynamics that needed to be addressed first. He said he couldn't build a healthy marriage while worrying about financial manipulation from family members, setting clear expectations about future boundaries. Mom immediately assured him our family was completely supportive, while her eyes kept darting to my bare ring finger, betraying her focus on potential jewelry value. She started talking about how she'd always dreamed of a small, intimate wedding, despite having told me my entire life that she expected me to have an extravagant celebration she could show off to her friends. Tom explained that marriage for him meant creating a new family unit with healthy boundaries, which would require distance from toxic influences, implying potential limitations to Mom's access. He was direct about his expectations expectations for our future together, explaining that while he was happy to help family in genuine emergencies, he wouldn't tolerate emotional manipulation or enable unhealthy financial dependency. Mom appeared shocked by the boundary discussion, but quickly insisted she respected our privacy, attempting to reposition herself as supportive. She claimed she'd never dream of interfering, despite her recent behavior proving exactly the opposite. Her pivot was so dramatic it would have been comical if it wasn't so frustrating. Tom brought out documents outlining his prenuptial agreement approach, but emphasized the agreement protected both parties and future charitable commitments, eliminating any perception of exploitable wealth. He explained that his financial advisors had created a standard framework that ensured both partners in a marriage maintained independence while sharing joint assets appropriately. Mom tried examining the paperwork, but Tom gently moved it away, saying it was between us, firmly establishing who would be part of financial decisions. He made it clear that our relationship decisions were ours alone, and while he respected family connections, he wouldn't allow inappropriate financial entanglements. I supported Tom's boundary setting, but felt torn seeing Mom's panicked expression, experiencing the emotional complexity of the situation. Part of me still wanted Mom's approval and love, despite recognizing her toxic patterns. I suggested we find a middle ground that maintained healthy boundaries while preserving family connections. Tom proposed a family therapy session to address dynamics before any engagement, but made clear this was non-negotiable, presenting a path forward with conditions. He explained that understanding and resolving these patterns was essential before we could move forward as a couple, but emphasized he wasn't asking me to choose between him and my family, just to establish appropriate boundaries. Mom immediately rejected therapy as unnecessary, but Tom remained firm that this was his requirement, creating a clear impasse. She claimed there was nothing to discuss, and that she was being unfairly characterized as manipulative when she was just being a concerned mother. The evening ended with tense silence, and Tom's driver was waiting to take Mom home, providing a dignified exit despite the conflict. She left without hugging me, clearly signaling her displeasure with how the evening had unfolded. After Mom left, Tom apologized for the ultimatum, but explained he couldn't build a life with someone while enabling toxic family patterns, showing his decision came from values, not cruelty. He emphasized that he wasn't trying to separate me from my family, but couldn't participate in unhealthy dynamics. His own parents had taught him the importance of establishing clear boundaries in all relationships. I felt conflicted about potentially losing connection with Mom, but recognized the unhealthy patterns, so I agreed to try the therapy approach. I'd spent years making excuses for Mom's behavior, but seeing it through Tom's eyes helped me recognize how damaging her influence had been on my own self-worth and expectations. Tom reassured me he wasn't asking me to cut ties with family, but needed healthy boundaries established, offering a balanced perspective. He shared stories about friends whose relationships had been destroyed by family financial manipulation, explaining this wasn't about the money itself, but about respect and autonomy in our relationship. We decided to give Mom a week to consider the therapy option, but agreed not to discuss finances further until progress was made, creating clear conditions. Tom suggested that this approach would actually help Mom in the long run by encouraging healthier relationship patterns, though he acknowledged she might not see it that way initially. That night, Mom sent a barrage of texts alternating between guilt trips and apologies, but her messages focused on what she would lose rather than our relationship, reinforcing Tom's concerns about her motives. She complained about feeling humiliated and claimed Tom was trying to buy my loyalty with his wealth, completely missing the point of our conversation. A week passed with no response from Mom about therapy, but she suddenly appeared at my workplace with lunch, attempting to reestablish connection on her terms. She acted as if nothing had happened, bringing my favorite sandwich and asking about weekend plans without addressing the elephant in the room. During lunch, Mom claimed she'd been reflecting on her behavior, but immediately suggested we look at wedding venues she'd researched, revealing her unchanged priorities. She showed me photos of exclusive locations on her phone, mentioning their connections to celebrity weddings and their extensive packages. I firmly redirected to the therapy requirement, but Mom dismissed it as Tom being controlling with his money, mischaracterizing the boundary as financial abuse. She suggested he was using therapy as a way to brainwash me against her, completely missing the purpose of family counseling. I explained therapy was about relationship patterns, not money, but Mom began crying about being excluded from her only daughter's life, attempting emotional manipulation. She claimed I was choosing his money over your own mother, reducing our complex situation to a transactional choice and ignoring the actual relationship issues. My colleague AJ witnessed the scene and supportively intervened, but Mom resented the intrusion, creating a public spectacle. She accused AJ of interfering in family business, when he simply asked if everything was all right after hearing raised voices. Tom arranged for a family systems therapist named Gold to contact Mom, but she initially refused the calls, demonstrating continued resistance. The therapist left several messages offering flexible scheduling and explaining the benefits of family therapy, but Mom ignored them all, later claiming she never received any calls, despite the detailed voicemails. After 2 weeks of silence, Mom surprisingly agreed to one session, but insisted it be at her home, attempting to control the environment. She claimed she couldn't afford the gas to drive to the therapist's office, a transparent attempt to maintain home field advantage for the difficult conversation. Therapist Gold declined the home visit but offered a neutral location, maintaining professional boundaries despite Mom's attempts to control the situation. She suggested a community center halfway between our homes, making it accessible for everyone without compromising therapeutic neutrality. The first therapy session was tense, with Mom presenting herself as the victim, but Gold skillfully redirected to concrete behaviors, keeping the session productive. When Mom claimed she was being attacked for loving too much, Gold gently asked for specific examples of how she expressed that love, leading Mom to struggle with identifying non-financial aspects of care. Mom admitted she'd always seen my marriage as her retirement plan, but claimed this was because she'd sacrificed everything for me, justifying her expectations. She became emotional, describing her own difficult upbringing and financial insecurity, connecting her obsession with money to genuine fears about her future. Gold highlighted how this perspective objectified both me and my relationship, but Mom struggled to see the problem, revealing deep-seated entitlement. She genuinely couldn't understand why planning for financial support through my marriage was inappropriate, showing how normalized this thinking had become in her worldview. Tom compassionately shared how his wealth had often attracted people with agendas, but expressed wanting different dynamics in his chosen family, offering vulnerability instead of judgment. He described painful past experiences with friends who disappeared when he refused to fund their lifestyles and romantic interests, who saw him as a wallet rather than a person. Mom seemed touched by Tom's openness, but later asked Gold privately about helping families share resources, demonstrating she still saw the situation primarily in financial terms. She was making a genuine effort to understand, but remained fixated on access to Tom's wealth as the central issue rather than the relationship dynamics. Gold suggested 6 more sessions before any engagement decisions, but Mom agreed to only 3, creating a compromised timeframe. She claimed she couldn't commit to a longer process due to other obligations, though she couldn't specify what those obligations were when asked directly. As we left the first session, Mom surprised us by sincerely apologizing for her behavior at the charity event, but added she hoped to make it up to us at the wedding, showing progress mixed with continued focus on future access. Her apology seemed genuine but still contained references to when you're married and your future together, revealing her continued fixation on securing that connection. 3 months and 5 therapy sessions later, we've all reached a place I never thought possible. Mom still struggles with prioritizing money, but therapist Gold helped her connect this to her childhood poverty and fear of returning to that state, giving us all greater compassion for her behavior. We learned her parents had lost everything in a financial crisis when she was young, creating deep insecurity she'd carried her whole life. Tom gradually revealed more of his wealth but established clear boundaries, helping Mom with legitimate needs while refusing to fund her extravagances. He offered to contribute to her retirement fund, but structured it in a way that prevented early withdrawal, addressing her actual financial insecurity without enabling impulsive spending. The breakthrough came when Tom offered to pay for financial literacy classes instead of giving cash, and surprisingly, Mom accepted. She began working with a financial counselor who helped her create a realistic budget and plan for her future, gradually reducing her dependency on external support. Last weekend, Tom proposed during a simple picnic in the park, with a modest ring that symbolized our values rather than his bank account, and I happily accepted. The ring was actually made with stones from his grandmother's collection, but deliberately designed to look understated and personal rather than flashy. Mom's reaction was telling. Initial disappointment at the ring's size followed by genuine happiness when she saw my joy. She actually caught herself making a comment about the diamond size and stopped mid-sentence, showing real progress in recognizing her problematic patterns. She's still Mom, still occasionally making comments about wasted potential when Tom wears his thrift store clothes to fancy restaurants, but she's learning. She recently caught herself suggesting he upgrade his car and actually apologized without prompting, demonstrating genuine effort to change long-established patterns. Tom's parents have embraced me warmly, impressed by how we handled the situation rather than judging the dysfunction. They've been surprisingly understanding about Mom's behavior, sharing their own stories about people who had tried to take advantage of their wealth over the years. As for Tom and me, this challenge ultimately strengthened our relationship. We've seen each other's values tested and affirmed under pressure. We've had difficult conversations about money, family, and boundaries that most couples don't face until much later, giving us a solid foundation for our future together. We're planning a small wedding focused on meaningful connections rather than displays of wealth, though Tom has secretly arranged to make a substantial donation to a legitimate animal shelter in Mom's name, acknowledging her stated passion while channeling it constructively. The donation includes funding for a program she can actually participate in if she chooses, offering a way to develop genuine involvement with a cause. Most importantly, I've learned that true wealth isn't about money at all. It's about having the courage to live authentically and the wisdom to recognize what truly matters. Growing up with Mom's constant focus on material security, I had absorbed more of her values than I realized. This experience has helped me examine my own relationship with money and status, leading to meaningful personal growth. Mom may never fully understand Tom's perspective on wealth, but she's beginning to respect it, and that's progress worth celebrating. She still has moments of regression, particularly when she sees her friends' daughters marrying wealthy men, but she's developing awareness about these reactions. I know this whole situation sounds like something from a movie, but it's been my reality for the past year. Sometimes I still can't believe how things played out, from Mom trying to have Tom thrown out of her charity gala to now actually participating in family therapy sessions. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that money really does reveal people's true characters. Tom had every opportunity to flaunt his wealth and shut my mom down from day one, but he wanted to be valued for who he is, not what he has. Meanwhile, my mom's obsession with status and money made her miss out on getting to know an amazing person who makes her daughter happy. The irony is that if she had just been decent to Tom from the beginning, he probably would have been more than generous with her. Instead, she had to learn her lesson the hard way. Tom and I joke now that maybe we should write a book about the whole experience, How to Catch a Gold Digger, or something equally ridiculous. But honestly, we're just looking forward to building our life together based on what really matters. And yes, sometimes that includes Tom insisting on buying secondhand furniture for our new house, even though we could easily afford new stuff. But that's just who he is, and that's exactly why I love him.